Hi friends, today we are going to discuss a famous poem, Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, as you know, is a leading figure of modernist movement, especially modernist literature, and his works are filled with obscure images and symbols. That is obscurity. Obscurity means nature of being unclear. His works are filled with unclear images, unclear symbols, and his works are also filled with several religious symbols and biblical allusions. The poem Journey of the Magi was written immediately after his conversion to Church of England, that is Anglicanism. And here in this poem, the poet explains the problems, dangers, difficulties, and mental agony one has to face while going on a journey for religious transformation or spiritual transformation, or while conducting a journey of spiritual quest, one has to face several problems, several dangers, and even mental agony. The poem centers on these kinds of problems one has to face while religious or spiritual quests, while conducting journey on spiritual quest. The poem is in the viewpoint of one of the Magi. It was narrated several years after his visit to this birth of infant Jesus, and he is narrating the problems they had faced while conducting this journey. Let us have a look on the life of T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, as you know, is an American-born British poet, critic, and dramatist. He had met Ezra Pound in 1914, which was a breakthrough in the life of T.S. Eliot. And Ezra Pound is his mentor, and he dedicated his work, The Wasteland, to this mentor, Ezra Pound. He is one of the leader of the modernist movement in poetry that we have already mentioned. He was born in St. Louis, Missouri in 1888, and he studied in Paris at the Sorbonne in 1910. In 1915, he married the British ballet dancer Vivienne Highwood, and in 1917 he established himself as an important avant-garde poet. In 1922 he edited the Criterion, an intellectual magazine, and his professions included being a poet, critic, and editor. In 1925 he became director for the publisher Faber and Faber. In 1925, he became the director for the publishers, the Faber and Faber. In 1927, he acquired British citizenship and converted to Anglicanism. In 1927, he had converted to the Church of England and Anglicanism. That we have already mentioned. He had converted to Church of England, and he had written this poem Journey of the Magi immediately after his conversion to the Church of England, that is Anglicanism. In 1930, from 1930 onwards, for the next 30 years, he was considered the most dominant figure in poetry, and literary criticism in the English-speaking world. He is the most dominant figure in poetry and literary criticism. In 1948, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature and even Order of the Merit. In 1965, he died in London. So, his lifespan is from 1888 to 1965. His major works can be divided into two categories, that is, before the conversion and after the conversion. He had written before the conversion in 1917 Provoke and Other Observation. His work Provoke and Other Observation was written in 1917. In 1922, The Wasteland. It is said to be the single most influential poetic work of the 20th century. It is the single most influential poetic work of the 20th century, that is The Wasteland. It was written in 1922. In 1925, The Hollow Man. In 1925, the work The Hollow Man. And after the conversion, his works can be seen as 1925 aerial poems, as his poem Journey of the Magi is one of the poems from this collection, Aerial Poems. In 1930, he had written Ash Wednesday, and between 1935 and 42, he had written 4 quartets. In 1935, Murder in the Cathedral, and 1939, Family Reunion. So, let us discuss the poem Journey of the Magi. We have just completed a short explanation, short history of his life and his works. Now we are going to the poem Journey of the Magi. Journey of the Magi was written in 1927 and was published in 1931. It was written 1927 and was published in 1931 in the collection The Aerial Poems. The collection The Aerial Poems, it was published. The poem was written soon after Eliot's conversion to the Church of England. We have already mentioned about it. The Magi are 3 wise men from the east who traveled to Bethlehem to visit the baby Christ and to pay homage to the baby Christ. They had traveled following the star which indicated his birth. They have traveled from east to Bethlehem following the star which indicated the birth of Jesus Christ. Okay. The poem Journey of the Magi. A cold coming we had of it, just the worst time of the year for a journey, and such a long journey. The ways deep and the weather sharp, the very depth of winter. The poem Journey of the Magi opens with a direct quotation from one of the Lancelot Andrewes' nativity sermons. Opens with a direct quotation from one of nativity sermon of Lancelot Andrewes. A cold coming we had of it, just the worst time of the year for a journey, and such a long journey, the ways deep and the weather sharp, the very depth of winter. They had conducted this journey in the very depth of winter, the difficult time of the year, the most difficult time of the year. It is not conducive to take a travel in this time, to conduct a travel in the depth of winter. It is not good. But actually, Jesus Christ was born in this depth of winter, and they are going to visit this birth of Jesus Christ following a star. Cold coming we had of it. It is very cold weather. We had experienced a cold weather and just the worst time of the year. It is worst time of the year to conduct a journey, for a journey, and such a long journey, especially for such a long journey from east to Bethlehem. It is very difficult, and no one could not travel such a long journey in the dead of the winter. The ways are deep and weather sharp. They are feeling a sharp weather, and it is not good to travel in this season of the year, that is very dead of winter. So the travel is very difficult. Travel from material life to spiritual life is very difficult. Okay, the camels got injury. Camels galled means camels got injury while traveling, while this journey. And sore-footed, they became sore-footed. And refractory means they were obstinate, they were not ready to move. The camels were not ready to walk, they were obstinate, as the weather was so sharp and the waves were deep. The camels were not able to move, so they were not ready to walk at all, they were obstinate. And even they lie down. Then very next line, lying down in the melting snow. They were lying down in the melting snow. The snow were melting, and the camels were lying down in the melting snow. There were times we regretted. Sometimes Magi were regretting on taking this decision to travel. Sometimes we regretted means they regretted. The first stanza is over, and the stanza opens with direct quotation from Lancelot Andrew's Nativity sermon, and explain the difficulty level they had to face while conducting this travel. Okay, the summer palaces. The next stanza, the summer palaces on slopes and the terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet. The stanza second, there is a shift, a change in symbols. There is a change in symbols and images, and softening of the rhythm can be perceived as suggesting the change in the landscape. A change in the landscape and symbols, a shift in the symbols and images can be seen. Summer palaces on slopes. They were witnessing the summer palaces on the slopes and the terraces. And silken girls bringing sherbet. Girls dressed in silk were bringing sherbets. Silken girls is an image taken from Saint J. Pierre's Anabase. Then the camelmen cursing and grumbling. Camelmen were cursing and grumbling as they had to conduct this journey in the dead of winter. And running away. Sometimes they were running away and wanting their liquor and women. They were running behind material pleasure or physical pleasure, and they were running away for what? Liquor and women, wanting their liquor and women. They are running away, wanting their liquor and women. That is, they are running after worldly pleasure, material pleasure. And night fires going out. The travel was very difficult. Even sometimes the night fires were extinguished, going out. And the lack of shelters, they even could not manage to find shelters. Lack of shelters were the time is dead of winter. Time is dead of winter, and they could not suffer the winter at night. They were not able to find shelter, sometimes lacking shelters. And moreover, the cities hostile. The cities were hostile and the towns unfriendly. Towns were also unfriendly. Hostile means inimical. City people were not ready to give them shelters, and they were not showing any kind of hospitality, just like the towns also. Towns were also unfriendly, and the villages dirty. The experience they had to face from towns was very hostile experience, and in villages they had a dirty experience, and these people were charging high prices for shelters, food and the like. They were charging high prices. The villages dirty and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. They had of it a hard time, difficult time we had of this journey. At the end, they tried to get some shelters by night, but they were not given any shelters. City people were hostile, town people were unfriendly, and even villages were dirty and charging high prices. It was the experience they had to face while conducting this journey. It was so difficult, and even they were regretting over their decision to travel in this depth of winter. And even camelmen were not ready to go on, and they were running away behind what? Liquor and woman. Finally, they had took a decision. What was the decision? At the end, we preferred to travel all night. At the end, they decided to travel all night, sleeping in snatches. They decided to travel all night and sleep for short periods. Snatches means for short period, with the voices singing in our ears, saying that it was all folly. See, while they were sleeping, the voices were there singing in their ears, saying that what was the voice? This was all folly, fool deeds. This was all folly means fool deeds. This is a short explanation of 2 stanzas, and the remaining will be done by the next video.